Good afternoon. How are we all doing today? Thank you all very much for joining us. My name is Carlos Carrillo. I'm the Executive Director of the South Florida AGC. And I want to thank you for joining us for the first in our Bluebeam webinar series. You guys don't want to see me. You guys want to see the stars of the show. But before I do that, I do need to say thank you to Brian Wesner and the members of the South Florida AGC Educational Committee, of which Ms. Sandra Biermar of our sponsor today is a part of. Brian, Sandra, and that whole education committee identified this as an important topic, and you all responded. We have over 50 folks registered to join us today. So I think you all are going to get a lot out of this. So that being said, let me say thank you to Digital Drafting Systems for being the backbone of this presentation today and lending us. I was arguing with him earlier. I don't know whether to call him Sifu, a Bluebeam Sifu, a Bluebeam Black Belt. We settled on Bluebeam Jedi, but he is technically a Bluebeam certified instructor. And we're very lucky to have Mr. Ari Retman with us today. So that being said, turning my screen off and handing things over to our Bluebeam Sensei for our 1 hour session. Mr. Retman, it's a pleasure having you. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I really appreciate it. Yeah, we were thinking that since we're doing 3 presentations, this could be the Padawan presentation. Next week will be the Jedi one. And then the last week, you'll all be masters of Bluebeam Review, right? That's the goal. So thank you so much once again. My name is Ari. I'm with Digital Drafting Systems, and it'll be a pleasure to show you all how Bluebeam Review works. So we have some benefits of using Revu, of course, and this presentation is going to specialize on contractors and how you can improve your workflow with Revu as contractors. So of course, we're going to showcase the best practices for creating digital reviews, along with improving your paperless workflow. And if you're used to doing something by hand, I'm going to show you how you can do it digitally, and it's not that much difficult. And the ability to copy and paste and move things is a big game changer. You'll be able to identify changes and revisions very quickly, especially if you're using studio projects and sessions, which we'll get into in our 3rd week, but you'll still be able to do that with local files as well. We're going to improve communication between ourselves and our clients and internally in our offices as well by using Revu, and we can limit the amount of emails and phone calls we have to make. And we're going to save commonly used markups to tool sets and deploy them across various departments. It'll be very easy to standardize your departments to make sure that everybody has access to the same tools and that the interface of the program is the same as well. So we can customize that when we need to. So let's look at the overview for today's webinar. I'm going to be showing you guys the best ways to set yourselves up for success when you're using Bluebeam Review. So we'll look at profiles and customizing our interface first. It's the most important thing that we need to do to make sure that everything is where we want it to be. Then we'll look at the comparison and overlay tools, 2 very useful tools that I think you guys are going to find very, very important. You can see by the images here on the right side that the comparison tool is this revision cloud right here, and the overlay tool shows the green and red colors showing new and old changes to a project. So we'll look at that a little bit later. Then we'll look at our tool chest, and I'll show you guys where you can find some extra tools on Bluebeam's website and how you can make your own tools as well with group annotations. Then we'll look at using our tools in 2 different ways, both in properties and drawing mode. Then we'll look at visual search and how we can create hyperlinks very quickly on different objects and different texts in our document. And we'll look at some security and flattening at the end if we have some time. So I'm going to switch to Bluebeam Review, and let me show you guys what I would do if I first open the program. Now, when I first open the program, it won't look exactly like this because I've already customized my interface. I have every single tool that's available in the program turned on at the top of the screen. The form one turns itself off every time you close and open the program. And I've also split my functions on the left and the right side of my screen. That way I can open up my tool chest and properties at the same time. And if I want to change a tool in the tool chest, I can just click on it. And in properties, it now allows me to change colors and font sizes and opacity and all kinds of information. So by default, we're not able to do that because by default, when we go to review and profiles, we're going to see a check next to review, which is the default profile. And so here's my profile with my initials. So I'm going to switch to review so that you guys can see a familiar site. Because if you've just started using Revu or if you haven't really learned about profiles yet, then your profile more than likely will look just like this. So the problem with this profile is that our tools and our properties are on the same side. They're both on the left side. So I can't view them at the same time. I could circumvent this by clicking on a tool in the tool chest and then swapping over to properties, and I can still modify it. So technically I could use this profile, but I'm going to recommend that you guys switch to another profile. So we're going to go to the review dropdown, mouse over profiles, and we're going to switch to review advanced. And if you're following along today, you can switch to this profile, and we're going to make a copy of it right now because this profile is a great starting point for maximizing efficiency and improving your workflow. So as you can see, just like my personal profile, this is split our functions. This is great. And we have some tools at the top of the screen. I'm now going to recommend a few tools to you and show you how you can customize them, especially by adding the Save As button right next to Save, right up here in the upper left. It's not there, so let's get our button for that. So 2 ways that we can turn tools on or off is if we right-click next to an existing group of tools, such as these up here, and we can see this list of tools. What I have turned on here is what I recommend. If you are going to be digitally signing and sealing documents, you can turn on digital signature, although it's not necessary. And the rest of these are very important, including these 4 right here with document up to file. And you can turn on or off certain tools that you don't need, but most of these are very useful for almost everybody. So that should help you guys out a lot. Now, there's 3 toolbars missing here, and we can find them by going to the tools dropdown, mousing over toolbars, and now we see these 3 toolbars right here. So the one that is not turned on by default that I recommend that everybody turns on and leaves on is the status bar. It'll provide you with some buttons that you can toggle on or off. That's going to give you so much more functionality that the program provides. So you guys can turn that on. And while we're here, we have customize at the bottom. So I can click on that. And here's where I can add the Save As button. So all I need to do is start from the upper left and work my way kind of like a snake, you could say. So we're going to start here with categories, and we're going to make sure that file is selected because Save As is found under the file category. The commands for Save As, or for file, excuse me, are all here, and here is Save As. Then under toolbar, these are the current tools that are on in my profile, not the ones that exist in the program. All the different tools are found under the categories right here. So I'm just going to scroll down until I find file. Now, all of the items that I have turned on in my profile for file are now found under items. So I'm going to click on Save As on the left side, click on the arrow right here, and then select Save As and use these blue arrows to move it all the way up, right below Save. So now I have them both. And if I wanted to, I could also turn on Save All. All right, so that's how you can customize it. I'm just going to click OK. And there it is. I now have a floppy disk with a pencil. So I can always save local copies if I'm working in studio projects or sessions when I need to. All right, excellent. So that's the first step to basically customize this. And you can also move these groups of tools up here by clicking on the vertical white dots to the left of every group of tools. So here's the one for this group. So I can move this to the left or the right. I can move it down. So it's very flexible. I could even move it outside of the toolbar area and have it floating if I really needed to. And that usually allows it to be a bit more flexible, although right now it isn't moving out for some reason. I know that the side panels can definitely be floating. So if I wanted properties to be on another screen, I would just drag it out here. And now I have it floating like this. Although I like to keep track of my panels, so I like to keep them all on my screen right here. All right, so now our interface is nearly done. Let's turn on some preferences, and then I'm going to show you guys how the status bar works. So we go to our settings by going to the review dropdown and clicking on preferences right here. Starting from general at the top and having options highlighted, everything here is fine. Just so you know, you can change your theme. If the dark theme is too dark, you can always change it to the light one. I would recommend that everybody goes to navigation up here and change their sensitivity from 4 to either 3 or 2. And that way, you can essentially scroll forward or back a little bit less each time so you can center yourself on your screen a bit more accurately. Having it at 4 seems to be a bit too drastic. I set it to 2 because I'm a little bit crazy. So then if we go to grid and snap, you all might find this useful as contractors. You can actually change your grid spacing right here. This is very helpful when you turn on the grid, and you can turn on snap to grid. So you can snap to different parts of it, which I'll demonstrate soon when we get to the status bar. But here is where you can change your grid spacing along with some other snaps that you can turn on or off. Then if we go to tools, we have 2 options that we should always have on: reuse tools and auto size text box and callout markups. We're going to see how they work very, very soon when I get to the status bar. And we'll see how auto-size text box and callout markups works when I create a text box for you guys. They're really, really useful, and they're going to save you a lot of time. Moving on, if you go to Studio and Servers, you can actually change your display name right here. All you have to do is sign in first, and then your display name will be here, and you can modify it if you ever needed to. We're going to get into Studio in our 3rd week, so I'm just going to make some quick little comments about it here and there today. Moving on, if we go to Advanced, if you're ever having any bugs with the software, if you're not able to open a PDF, or if you're having color issues visually, you can change your rendering engine from hardware to software.
Yeah, Dolph, I was going to mention it. I do have a question. I don't know if we put it as an RFI, but the doors and frames have slipped now twice. I'm wondering if there will be an option to do a knockdown door frame.
Hi, Brian. Are you asking me a question?
Oh, my apologies.
I forgot to mention to everybody, if you guys do have any questions, you can type, excuse me, in the Zoom chat. And at the end, about 10 minutes before we end, I'm going to look over the questions and I'll answer as many as I can. But no problem. All right, good. So anyway, so the rendering engine can change. So you can change it from hardware to software. Hardware usually works better with more powerful computers, and software works better with computers that are a little bit older. So you guys can swap between them and see if it fixes any bugs that you're having. And lastly, we can go to admin. And if you ever need to reset your program because it's having a bug, you can do so right here. Making a backup usually includes the bug. So instead of doing that, just make sure that you export your profile and your tools. Speaking of which, when we're done with our settings, we'll click OK. And let me show you guys how you can share your profile with your colleagues very easily. Let's go back to Review and Profiles, and then Manage Profiles down here. And here's where I can make a brand new profile. So now that the Review Advanced profile is my current profile, I can click on Add and create a brand new one. Now, I'm not going to do that because I already have my profile, but now you guys know. And the import and export buttons are here. So if I wanted to share my profile, I would select it in the list and click on Export. And it's a small little .bpx file. It's a really, really nice little file. You can put it on a USD drive, send it to yourselves in an email. It's very, very small and handy to have. All right, great. So let me swap back to my profile. I'll just go to Review, Profiles, and AR Profile. There it is. Perfect. So basically, my profile is the same, like I mentioned. I just have all the tools turned on for visibility purposes. Okay, now besides profiles, let me show you guys a few other things. I want to talk about the status bar really quickly. Let me just go back to our PowerPoint really quick. Yep, interface customization and then comparisons. Good. I'm on track. So the status bar. It's this bar all the way at the bottom of our screen. We can see the word ready down here. And if I swap to another function, such as the highlight tool, now it gives us some instructions on how to use the tool. So if you don't know how to use something, and this is your first time, select it and look on the bottom left. As long as the status bar is open, you'll see this text. Moving to the right of that text, we have show grid and snap to grid. Just like I mentioned earlier, we can turn that on. We have all these dots, and then we can snap to it here. So if you need to use a specific grid, you can then change your grid spacing and preferences like I showed you, and then turn your grid on and snap to it as well. So for example, if I use a line right now and I click next to one of these dots, I can draw from it to the other dots and snap perfectly. So it's quite convenient. Now I'm going to turn that off for today's presentation. The third button here, I recommend that everybody turns on and uses most of the time. It's called Snap to Content. We're dealing with a PDF that came from CAD, and there's PDFs that come from BIM programs, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and all of them create vector data. And vector data is smart data. As I zoom in on any vector data, it keeps refreshing itself, so it looks really crisp and clear no matter what. So this is all vector data here, all the lines that exist on this page. So I can actually use the line tool, and I can move my mouse on top of this data, and I can see a nice little box here. This box simulates some of the snaps that you're familiar with if you use programs like AutoCAD. So for example, when the box is white, this is like the nearest snap. When the box turns blue, it's using a specific snap. So if I'm in the middle of a line, it's the midpoint. The end of a line is an endpoint. When it comes to circles, we have all 4 quadrants. And we also have intersections. So not as many snaps as you're familiar with CAD, but close enough. And most of the ones that are very important for us when it comes to our markups and drawing in Review. All right, so that's how Snap to Content works. And the opposite of vector data is raster data, and that data is like an image or a scan. So anything that you put on a scanner bed becomes raster data immediately, even if it was a vector data drawing of a building or a site, for example. So as I zoom in on raster data, it becomes a bit more pixelated and never really refreshes itself. So this image right here is a good example of raster data. Along with this image here, as I zoom in on it, it's very, very pixelated. So this is all raster data. And we can't really snap to raster data, but you can still calibrate, and you'll have to guess as much as you can and be as close as possible to calibrating accurately. With vector data, you just snap, so the calibrations are almost always perfect. All right, so that's basically our interface, and we've turned on our status bar, which is great. Let me actually explain the last few buttons in the status bar before we go into comparisons and overlays. The fourth one allows us to snap to markup. So just like snap to content, I can now draw from the corner of a markup to the middle of one, for example. The issue with snap to markup is that there's all of these little guidelines here. So Revu wants to draw in relation to other markups. So I don't recommend that you leave it on at all times. I have it off most of the time, and I turn it on whenever I need it. The fifth one is reuse markup tools. Like I mentioned in preferences, it's great to have this on because now when I draw a line up here, I can keep drawing over and over and over again. And if I had this turned off, then Revu would immediately deselect the tool from my cursor, and I'd have to click on the line tool again in order to make a second and a third one. So that takes too long. Now, when I'm done drawing, instead, because I have reuse markups tools turned on, I must press the escape key when I'm done. If I want to select more than one markup very quickly, I can also use the select tool instead of the pan tool right here. And then I can click and hold to make a nice box around my markups, and then I can just delete them with the delete key. So there's many different ways to quickly select things, and the reuse markup tools will allow you to get used to using the escape key if you're not familiar with CAD or BIM programs. Moving on, we have synchronized views, and this is going to help us when we do comparisons and overlays because we'll be able to see both views moving together if one is zoomed in a particular area. So we'll see how that works when I demonstrate comparisons and overlays, which I believe now is a good time for that. So comparisons and overlays are really, really cool. And let me show you guys our thumbnails list to show you what we're going to be comparing today. We're going to be comparing page 2, which is an old version of this floor plan, with page 3, a slightly newer version, and I also created some markups on it. So we're going to see how comparisons and overlays work with both vector data and markups. So first we go to document, and then compare documents is right here, and overlay pages is right below it as well. Let's use a comparison first and see if we have enough information in the comparison to give a final consensus on what changed exactly. So I'm going to click on compare documents. And here I'm going to make sure I'm using the correct file. Yep, that's the right one. I'm going to change my pages. I'll just click once and then type the number 2 because document A will be the old one. And then document B will be using the same PDF set, but this time it'll be page 3. Now, if you're comparing 2 separate documents, then if you have both of them open, then Revu will place document A and B in their order that they were opened. So document B would be the second drawing. So that's usually a much faster way to do things. And I'm doing something a bit odd where I'm comparing 2 pages in the same document set, which causes some nuanced issues that I'll show you how to fix if you ever need to do what I'm doing today. Anyway, if your entire site or a building on the site has shifted its location, then you can use manual alignment to make sure that you're not comparing that change in location, but you're comparing the little details inside of the building that have changed. So you can use pick points, and you can select 3 points that are similar on both the old and the new floor plan. So that could be quite useful if you need to use it. I don't need to use it today, so we're going to skip over it. Now we can go to advanced down here, and we can see different kinds of settings for our comparisons. So we can create essentially 4 major kinds of comparisons. We can include markups. We can include flattened markups. We can include either or neither. And so that's why if we go up here, I have these 4 comparisons that I created myself. And I usually just use the all markups one. So it includes everything. If you're here and you're following along, you can change your DPI or dots per inch to 144 instead of 72. It'll make your comparisons a little cleaner and more accurate. And down here, if you ever need to change certain information about the comparison, for example, what PDF is the comparison going to be created from? In this case, it'll be a new copy of document B, so it'll be a new copy of the new floor plan. So we'll have all our clouds there, and the name of the file will be the same as our file name, but it'll put _diff at the end. We're going to make a brand new PDF. So our settings look good. We can click OK, and then I'll click OK again. Once our settings are done, we literally just go to comparison. We make sure that our pages are correct. We click OK, and the comparison takes seconds to make. And now we can see the comparison here on the left side. So let's see what we can do with this comparison. On the right side, I'm going to choose page 2, because on the left side, we have a copy of page 3. So now when I zoom in here, we can see some of the differences without having to use an overlay. For example, it's pretty obvious that a door was added in the new version of this PDF. So that's good to know, and that's what this revision cloud is referring to. Now, if we pan over here to these two offices, it's a little bit unclear as to exactly what happened with these offices. So the comparison doesn't exactly give us all the info that we need. So let's use an overlay to confirm our assumptions. So we can go to the document dropdown and click on overlay pages. It's also going to pick up on any PDFs that are currently open. An issue with this is that my comparison is open and I do not want to use the comparison for this. So I'm just going to select it and use the red X to get rid of it. Now it's chosen a nice green color, which is not a default green. So I just want to change the pages here. So I'll double click and I'm going to change the page to page 3. That way green is new and red will be old. Let's get page 2 up here. We need to click on add in order to add it up there. Now it still wants us to add the other document, the comparison document, as our second overlay page. And it doesn't even give us the option to use our other document because overlays tend to be done with 2 separate PDFs. So instead, I'm just going to click on the square with the 3 dots, and I'm going to manually find my example floor plan. I believe it is right there. And then I'm just going to choose page 2. It chose the color red automatically, a nice bright red, and this is a default color. It's this red right here. I recommend that you use the default green and the default red because they really work well together with overlays. So now that I have them, I'll just reorder them so I can visually understand what I'm overlaying. So I'll select this one and use the arrow. So now I have the old floor plan, it's red, it's page 2, and the new one is green, it's page 3. Before we say OK and we initiate the overlay, let's look at some settings that we can change by clicking on Edit Defaults. So you can change the different colors that are used automatically with overlays. So if I had a 3rd document or a 4th document, I could use blue and cyan as the next colors, for example. Then I can choose my blend here. I recommend the darken default blend. It's the best one because when red and green are on top of each other in this blend, they make black, so it doesn't look like anything changed. And in other blends, it makes them a bit muddy sometimes. So our settings here are fine as they are. Now we're going to click OK and initiate the overlay. And now the overlay is ready. It's on the left side. I'm going to drag it to the right side so I can look at the overlay and the comparison at the same time. So I'm just going to click and hold on the word overlay up here. This is the file tab for the file. So I'll just click and hold it. And I'm going to see little white arrows appear in the corners, depending on if I'm putting this before or after a document. So I'm going to put this before the example floor plan right there. All right, perfect. And now I'm just going to use my comparison to navigate. And I have a fun acronym for you guys to use with comparisons and overlays so you can understand what their purpose is. Compare where, overlay what. So comparisons are like our eyes, and it's very easy to see the revision clouds. So comparisons essentially tell us where something changed. Excuse me. Overlays, on the other hand, they tell us what changed. So here we can clearly see that a new door was added and this wall was changed a little bit. So that's great. Now let's go to those 2 offices and see if the overlay can help us a bit more. Yes, now we can see, if you guys remember the PowerPoint that I showed you, I've taken screenshots of these 2 areas, of course, and here they are. So we have our comparison on the left, the overlay on the right, and the overlay clearly tells us the offices got bigger. So it's much, much easier to see it with the overlay, but the comparison is nice because it told us that there was an issue here. If I was zoomed out, for example, I won't be able to really see all of the different changes in the overlay, but the comparison, I can just see them even if I'm zoomed out like this. So for example, the restrooms changed here. We now have 3 stalls instead of 2. And moving on, we have some changes here that were made. This label is gone now, it doesn't exist anymore. And they added some lines here that I think are surrounding this beam. And let's look at these markups that I created. The comparison found them. It easily made a revision cloud around both of them. But the overlay doesn't even show the markups. So this teaches us that the overlay does not include markups at all, while comparisons are excellent for markups. So all you need to do in order to fix that is you can essentially flatten your markups to the page and the overlay will pick them up, because anything that's flattened is just like any of these lines that came from CAD or BIM, for example. So flattening is the way if you want to use overlay. Wow, that was a fun little rhyme. Nice. All right, so that's comparisons and overlays. So let me close out of them. And remember, if you guys have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat box and I will go over them near the end of the presentation. Okay, great. So that was comparisons and overlays. Let's go back to our presentation slides. Let's learn about tools and let me show you where you can find some more of them. So our tool chest, we can access it by clicking on the lunchbox icon right here. And I have all kinds of tools here. And what I've done is I've swapped them into what's called properties mode. So right now, if I use this text box here, I can create a brand new text box with new data, but it still kept the same blue color and all the other settings that I associated with it. And we can go to properties and see them all right here. And so that's great. But what if there's a specific word or phrase or label that I use on a day-to-day basis that I would like to use instead of a brand new text box? I don't want to have to type in that word or phrase every single time. So all I need to do is double click on a tool in the tool chest. And now it switches into exactly the text that I used when I saved this tool. The text box template is the text that I use because I don't have any placeholder text. But I work with clients that have to write things such as approved or please revise and all kinds of notes, for example. So if you have any kinds of notes or things like that, you can write them ahead of time, then select your markup, right click on it, mouse over, add to tool chest, and add it to your group of tools. And that way you can have the best of both worlds. You can have an exact word or phrase, and then you double click on your markup, and now you can use it in properties mode. So drawing mode is an exact carbon copy, and properties mode is using the properties. And that's how we can switch our tools. So for example, if I double click on all of my tools up here, I can swap them all basically into drawing mode. And then if I double click on them again, I can tell which tool I'm using based on the icon above them. So now I can see that this is a text box, this is a callout, this is a cloud, and this is the Cloud Plus tool. So that's basically how tools and markups work. I'm not going to go through every single tool today because we have plenty of tutorials and other webinars on that. But I do want to show you guys some cool things. Firstly, you can turn anything into a tool. I've actually done so with this sink and this toilet. So how did I do it? Well, I went to these restrooms here and I said, oh, you know, I think that I like these. I want to use them again in the future. So all I need to do is use the Snapshot tool. I can find it here at the top of my screen. And if you don't see it on your screen, you can go to Edit and Snapshot is here. And you can also press the G key to access it. So here's Snapshot. With Snapshots, I recommend that you go a little bit outside of the object. So I'm just going to go a little bit outside of the sink right here, make a box around it, make a nice even box. The white space isn't too important, but it still is part of the snapshot a little bit. So now I have it. Now I can't click on anything yet because I can see that my blue box is here. So I need to use my keyboard for the next part. I need to copy and paste my snapshot. So I'm going to hold Control and press C, and then hold Control and press V. And now my snapshot is pasted right to the upper right of wherever my cursor was. So that's why the sink is right here. And there it is. I now have a sink. Now, interestingly enough, while it's a snapshot, it looks like the line weights have turned back on for the sink. And I actually didn't mention something to you guys that I find very, very cool in this program. You may have noticed that a lot of my line weights in this document are all thin. They're actually the exact same line weights as each other. But is that the case? Is that how it was created in CAD? Well, no, of course not. I've actually temporarily turned all my line weights off so I can easily snap to the center of my lines. So I can turn them back on by clicking on this button right here, Disable Line Weights, and you can find it under the View dropdown all the way at the end. So I'm just going to click on it, and these are the original line weights of this drawing. So you don't have to go and ask CAD to print you a version without thick line weights if you need both versions. Now you can easily turn them on and off. You can do your measurements very accurately, and I can snap to this intersection here, which I couldn't see before. For example, here it's pretty much blocked, so I have no idea that it's even there. And so there you go. That's how you can disable and enable line weights. I have my line weights almost always disabled most of the time. Some objects in text will act a little bit funky when you turn disable line weights on. So you might want to turn it off and then turn it on when you need it. Anyway, I now have this snapshot that I created of the sink. So just like any image, I can essentially right click on it and add it to my tool chest. And I've already done so. And here's my sink, and I can use it over and over again. That's a great way to take any objects on a PDF and use them as a tool and use them over and over again in the future. And you can build your tool library by doing so. And a lot of people have done that already. So I'm going to scroll down and show you a lot of tools that I found online. For example, I found some basic stamps and some proofreading symbols that are not really for contractors, but I'm a writer, so I like them. For you guys in particular, we have some doors and windows, some electrical symbols if you guys need to use them, if you need to place certain objects or locate certain things. More electrical telecom symbols. We have some plumbing here. HVAC is useful, not as much for you all, but still it's good for you guys to know that these all exist. Some furniture, some spacing. We have some kitchen stuff. Fire life and safety is quite useful. I had a client that works and specializes in that. So they basically found these tools and love them. Then we have security and CCTV that we found, along with some landscaping. This is much more relevant for contractors in your discipline. So we have some landscape fixtures, some trees, some people that we can place outside, and of course, some lovely estimation tools. These are all essentially area tools that have certain materials associated with them and certain costs associated with those materials. So when you use them, they'll essentially automatically cost they'll calculate the cost of tile, for example, carpet. This one is another kind of carpets. Let's see, we have so many different kinds of carpet, and so on and so forth. So, and here, this one's brick, for example, AstroTurf. So there's many different areas that you can create that have different associations. And I'm going to show you guys how that works in next week in our quantity takeoffs webinar, because that one I think will be quite useful for all of you and very relevant. And the last group of tools that I found that I think will also be relevant for you all are these punch key little circles. So essentially, you can take these and you can place them on your drawing. I also have some more trees at the end. Now, what if you wanted to make your own? What if we're missing a certain acronym or some letters here? So I can take one of them. I can just place them on my sheet here, and I can select it and make sure that properties is open. Because here on the top of properties, it says group annotation. This is actually a little bit different from, let me go back to that sync that I showed you guys earlier. This is different from what's called a snapshot. So this sync here is a snapshot. So group annotations, snapshots, and images tend to be similar to each other, but they actually have very specific differences. Snapshots are similar to images, but you can modify some of their settings in properties. Images, you can't really modify their settings too much, except for opacity, basically. And a group annotation is much, much easier to manipulate because it actually is a combination of markups to form one markup. So I can then right-click on top of this, and I can go to ungroup. And if I was to do this with multiple lines selected, instead of ungroup, I would see group. So I'm going to click on ungroup. Now these are back to being individual markups. I believe it just involves one text box and one, let's see if I can click on it. Is it going to let me? There it is, one circle. And this is very good because look at this. The circle even has some text associated with it in properties. It's an access panel. Look at that. So that's what this stands for. You all probably know more than I do about what these acronyms mean. But what if I wanted to change it? So I'm just going to be silly and I'm going to change it to my initials. Why not? Maybe I'm a special punch key symbol. So there it is. I put it to AR. I'm going to move it down. If I want to keep it straight down and I don't want to eyeball it, I can hold the shift key. And you can do this with almost all of the tools. You can hold shift and it allows you to draw straight lines. For example, with the line tool, I can draw a straight line horizontally, diagonally, and vertically. So I'm holding shift while moving my cursor. If I let go of shift, then I can just draw free form just like this. Anyway, I've now modified my little punch key. I'm going to select both markups. I do that by holding shift. Most of the time you would hold control in most programs to select more than one thing, especially in Windows when you're selecting more than one file. But in Bluebeam Revu, control works a little bit differently and shift is more for selecting more than one markup. So now I have them both selected because I can see both groups for both markups. I can then right click and group. And I now have a group annotation once again. And I can save that to my tool chest. And there it is. So that's how you can basically create your own markups from different shapes and symbols in this program. You can combine lines with text, as you just saw right now, along with many other different things. All right, great. So that is essentially tools in a nutshell. Now, where did I find all these tools? Well, I thought I had a web browser ready for this. Let me see. I will get it ready for you all right now because I have this saved. It's a really, really nice part of Bluebeam's website. Here we go. So you can go to support.bluebeam.com/review-custom-libraries. And then you can scroll down. Everything is on one page, all 4 of these categories here. So let's click on tool sets, and then we can see that we have many different disciplines up here. So for example, if we go to architecture and landscape, Here are the people and trees that I showed you guys earlier. And then construction, of course, will be very useful for you all. We have so many more different sets of punch keys for different disciplines. So carpentry, cleaning, electrical, et cetera, et cetera. We even have sequences and actions, which you can make your own sequences, but we have some predefined sequences here that are quite nice. So now you know that there's even more tools than I showed you, and they're all here. Once you download them from here, just double click on them in a folder, and essentially Bluebeam will recognize them and ask you if you want to import them. You say yes, and you're done. And so that's how these tools work. All right, great. So let's go back into the program, and let's actually go back into our presentation and see if I missed anything. All right, yes, I talked about that. Let's get into visual search and hyperlinks. I think that'll be a great way to start to end off this one. And I think we'll have time for security and flattening as well. So how does visual search work? Well, you can access it by going to this little magnifying glass right here. And you have search at the top. This is for text. And then this is for visual up here. And they're similar to each other in terms of their options. And text is pretty obvious. You can type any text here, and it'll look not only for markups if you want it to, but also for any text that's been flattened to the page. So anything that came from CAD, I could search for these storages, for example, or I could search for how many offices we have. So that could be quite useful if I'm doing some quantity takeoffs in regards to how many offices we have on the drawing, for example. So if I go to visual right here, then this is the fun part. This is where we can search for actual objects instead of just text. So I like to use these sinks as an example. I'm going to use get rectangle. I'm going to make a rectangle around the sink, just like I did with Snapshot. So the exact same concept here, except that when I'm done, I now have a preview up here and I can click. So there's no restrictions. So I now have this preview. Everything's looking good. I need to check my options and my sensitivity before I continue, because I now have some questions to ask myself. Do the other sinks on this drawing have lines going through them? And the answer is yes. We have this grid line going through this one, through the whole thing. And this grid line is going about halfway through. So technically, all three of these sinks are different objects. So we can circumvent this issue by basically scrolling down in the sensitivity area right here. And so now that my sensitivity is set a little bit lower, I'm going to find any sinks that have a few extra lines associated with them. And I have an option here that says search multiple rotations. So this is not a problem. I can search for sinks in any orientation, even if they weren't perfectly 90 degrees. So now I'm ready. I'm going to click on search. My percentage is going to increase down here. Before that, I could have also changed what page I'm searching on. So I'm just searching on this page, not all 6 pages in my PDF set. So now we have 5 results found. And if I'm expecting that amount, then it looks like my search was good. If I got too few or too many searches, I would just change my sensitivity bar slightly and I would do another search. So now I have my options here. If we select them in the list, they highlight in blue and that's it. They don't center themselves on the screen. And if they're not on the screen, then they're just going to kind of be on the edge of the screen. The screen will navigate towards them, but that's it. It won't center them. So we can't really use the objects right now. So the best thing to do when you get your results is to select them all at the same time by clicking on this box right here. And then you click on the lightning bolt icon. This is called check options. We can click on this, and this is where we can get a lot of power. We can actually create hyperlinks with all these sinks. So if somebody clicks on the sink, it can take them to a website. It can take them to another page. It can take them to a separate PDF. Maybe you included multiple PDFs in your submittal, for example. So it's really, really powerful. So let me show you how hyperlinks work. Now, before I do, I'll just let you guys know. You can also apply count measurements very quickly to all these objects. You can highlight all of them very quickly. Highlighting is my favorite thing to do because it turns them all into a markup that you can quantify in your markups list. So if you do want to quantify them and hyperlink to them, I recommend making a hyperlink and highlighting them at the same time. So let's do a hyperlink first. Now, this is the hyperlink dialog box, which we call the action dialog. And now we have so many different options for hyperlinking. I can jump to a specific page in my floor plan. I can also go to a place, and it could be a predefined place. I've done this before, so I already have 4 places that I've used before, and I've given them all names. And if I wanted to make a new one, I can just click on create. But for now, I can use one of these existing ones. Then I can go to a space. A space is an actual asset in Revu that people use usually for rooms, but you could use this for anything. You can just make a rectangle or any shape around a certain area, and that can be a space. So you could use that if you wanted to. You can go to a specific snapshot. Then here's hyperlink. So this would lead to a website, and open is here too. So I can open a new file from here. So I'm just going to keep it simple. We're going to jump to a place. Let's choose, let's try the toilet RFI one. Let's see what happens here. So we'll click OK. That means that all the syncs automatically have the same hyperlink. When they're not selected, then the hyperlink is usually orange. This one is brown for some reason. Ah, yes, because it was selected. There it is. So what I've done is I've actually changed my hyperlink properties. So how do you do that? Because you can't click on a hyperlink. If you click on it, it takes you to where you're located. So to modify a hyperlink, all you need to do is right click on it. And then you can just leave this dialog here and then go to properties. It's still highlighted and we can see the grips around the hyperlink. So this is great because here is where I can change my color. And usually hyperlinks have no color. So if you wanted to, you can uncheck visible and that way your hyperlink wouldn't really exist. And that way, basically everything would look normal and nobody would really know that there's a hyperlink there. So that's why I changed it to have a color just so it's easily visible and you can tell that there's a hyperlink there. So I'll right click on this again. I'm going to say, whoops, I accidentally hit appearance. Let me make sure that I uncollapse that. I'm going to make it visible. It remembered its old color and that's perfect. And that's it. So that's hyperlinking. That's how we create the hyperlink. Now let's finally use it and see where it leads to. So I'm going to click on the sync. Looks like it took us to, we can see down here, page 3. And I made a little place right over this markup here. So that's perfect. So this hyperlink led to right there. So that's how you can use hyperlinks. It's really, really nice and powerful. So I'm going to go back to page 1. There's a few ways I can do that. I could actually click down here once and I can type 1 and then enter. So that's a great way to use keyboard shortcuts for it. Another way is I'll show you guys a really cool tip about navigation. Since this is our intro class, it's good for you guys to know how it works. When you open a document that is in landscape, and this happens to be a 42 by 30 inch sheet, then Revu is going to use one full page. It's the setting right here. And that means that when I use my mouse wheel, I can roll it forward and back and zoom in and out, which is great. And that's usually my preference whenever I'm navigating any document. Now, I'm going to go to my thumbnails list and I'm going to switch to one of these 8.5 by 11 pages. Let's go to this. This is our syllabus for our training course. So here, by default, if Revu is opened and this was the first page that was there, or this was the last page that was left open, then it would do this. It would swap to scrolling pages automatically. And my mouse wheel now goes down and up instead of zooming in and out. Now, what's nice about this is that if I keep scrolling, I can scroll to the other pages seamlessly. So technically, everything is in one view. And now I'm going to prove that to you. We can do that by holding the control key. Now I've started in scrolling pages. So when I hold control and zoom out, now I can zoom out like usual and everything is now visible to me. I can see all my sheets in one view, which is great. Now, what if we did the opposite? What if I started with one full page and then I held the control key and rolled my mouse wheel? Now I can quickly flip between my pages very, very seamlessly. I don't have to click on anything. I don't have to type anything. I'm just holding the control key with my left hand. So this is a great way to basically navigate between pages. You don't have to go to thumbnails and click on your page. Instead, the control key is a really, really nice way to swap between sub-functions of almost every single function in this program. So that's how control works, and that's the best way to navigate. All right, great. Now, I think that we've gone over almost everything. Let's get into security and flattening because we are almost ready for questions. This is perfect timing. So security and flattening. I mentioned flattening a little bit earlier about how markups could be flattened in order to be used in overlays. How do we flatten markups? There's actually 2 ways to do it. I can take any markup and I can select it. Then I can right click on it and flatten is right here. If I do this, this is a semi-permanent action, which means that if I close my document and save my document, this image or this markup, excuse me, is flattened forever. Now, I don't necessarily want to do that. And the only way to undo this is to press the undo key while I'm still in the file. So let me press it a couple times, maybe a third time. There it is. I have my markup back. So that is a very quick way to flatten things. And if you're not expecting to need to unflatten something, just quickly highlight everything. So for example, if I am about to give a submittal, I can just make a big box over everything. Make sure you use the select tool in order to get that box. And then every single markup is highlighted. And as a result, I can just right click on one of them and flatten them all at the same time. That's a great way to quickly get a submittal ready to go. And before doing so, I recommend that you make a copy of your working file so that you have your working file and then you have your submittal as a separate entity, just in case. Now, if you want to use the same file and be able to submit that, and you're also not too worried about people being able to unflatten your markups, then you can go to the Flattened Dialog. Two ways to access it are by going to Document and Flatten right here. If you have the Flatten icon in the top part of your bar, so I have one right here, and there was a second one that I had, but I actually turned it off by using the customized tools that I showed you guys earlier. So if I click on this Flattened Dialog, this is much more sophisticated. Now I can flatten more than one document at the same time and more than one page at the same time. So I can do that by going to Add down here and opening more files or a folder filled with PDFs. It's really, really nice. Then under Options, I can choose what kinds of markups I want to flatten. So if I just wanted to do images, I can uncheck everything and then just check images, for example. I'm just going to check everything on again. And then here we have Flatten, and it's going to ask us if we want to do all markups. If we have filtered markups, we can basically avoid flattening them, and we can filter with the markups list. I'll show you guys that next week when we get into quantity takeoffs. And if we select markups ahead of time and then click on the Flatten button, we can use currently selected markups. And that way we can just quickly flatten whatever we selected. That's a very nice and quick way to do it without having to flatten everything in the document. Then the special part about this Flattened Dialog is Allow Markup Recovery. So here's the option. And if I check it on, then the Unflatten button will be available to me in the future. So if I do this and I save my document, I open it up again, I can come back to the Flattened Dialog and click on Unflatten, and everything will be back to be able to be modified, for example. Now, I usually don't like to allow markup recovery, so I uncheck it most of the time. All right, so that's how flattening works, and that's flattening in all of its sophistication. Now, let me show you guys how security works. But before I do, I need to take a little drink break. I'll be right back for a second.
While he's doing that, folks, just a reminder, if you have questions, please put them into that chat box. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And it looks like I already see that there's 4 chats in the chat box. That's great. I can't wait to answer the questions. Okay, good. So let's go over security. So how can we access it? We just need to go to Document, and Security is right here. Another quick way to access it is, if you don't have a markup selected, then you have this bar that's below our shortcuts up here, and there's a button here called Document. You can actually click on it. It's a drop down. It gives us information about our PDF, and we can click on Show Document Properties. So this dialog actually contains 4 tabs at the top of the screen, including security. And that's the other way to get to security. So you can go to Document and Security or just go through it by clicking on that button. So just so you know, before we get into security, General allows you to have some pre-populated information. So anytime I make a markup, if I wanted the author to be my name, I can just type my name here, and that would automatically be put in the author column every time I make a markup. It's really, really cool. Now, this actually, the author will actually change the author of this PDF. And so the author in the future, other PDFs will not be changed. So you'll want to do that per document. So then we can go to security. And here, everything is allowed by default because there's no security settings. If you want to change your security settings, you can do so only before signing a document. So change your security and then sign your document if you want to include specific settings. So we're going to click on Change Permissions. And here's where we can modify it all. I can do this for more than one document. Just like you saw earlier, we have that same dialog box at the top here where I can choose my pages and I can add more PDFs. Then I can require a password just to open the document. And then I can also require one to print, copy, or edit the document. And it's so flexible, I can basically only allow printing. For example, I can uncheck allowing changes, no copying text or graphics. And you know what? I don't mind if somebody extracts content. That is very important to leave on if I'm expecting somebody else to need to measure on my document, because measuring is similar to markups and similar to making changes. So if I don't allow changes, then that means nobody can make measurements in my document. So after I sign something, if I'm submitting, for example, to a municipality and they need to measure and check some things before they put their seal of approval, then I need to allow for extracting content. And when we go to sign, we can also allow for markups. So we can be flexible whenever we need to. And then I recommend that everybody uses the middle encryption method, the 128-bit AES. I did some research and it turns out that one is more modern and the most secure. So just to let you guys know. All right, so that's how security works. And once you do that, then you'll see that instead of everything being allowed here, some of them will be restricted. And so you can modify that per your submittal. All right, guys, I believe that is it for our little introduction presentation today. So let's go back to our PowerPoint, and I think it's time for questions. So I'm going to open up our chat. There it is, and I'm going to start from the top because it looks like we got some questions in the beginning. All right, Carlos wrote some stuff here. There we go. So Gus Rowley says, we use Bluebeam every day. Some files are too large and take forever to render. How can we speed this up? Oh, I'm so glad you asked because I learned about this 3 weeks ago in a conference. So all you need to do is you can go to your preferences. So you go to the review dropdown and click on preferences. And then under advanced, something that I didn't mention, and I should have mentioned earlier, I'm so glad you asked this question, is our rendering mode. So you guys are all contractors and you're dealing with surveyors, engineers, and architects. And sometimes you're going to get files, especially from surveyors, that are massive. And they have maybe tons of markups from the surveyors too, or even assets from CAD that turned into markups in Revu. So what you can do is you can go to your rendering mode and change it from iterative draw to wait for completion. Iterative draw tries to load almost everything in your PDF at the same time. So if you have a powerful computer, it'll make things load a little bit faster. Wait for completion will load something as soon as you navigate to it and it's visible on your screen. So it allows things to load faster, but when it comes to pixelation, you're going to notice that there's probably maybe a 5-second delay on how fast pixels and other things load. So if you're moving across your document very quickly, you can see the difference between wait for completion and iterative draw. So you can switch it if you guys need to, and that should help with really big documents. Let me show you one more tip because I'm really glad you asked that question, Gus. What you can do is you can go to, I believe it's under the document dropdown. Let's see if I remember where it is. It allows, there it is, reduce file size. Perfect. And I made a tutorial on this on our website, which I'll give you guys a link to a little bit later. So we can reduce the file size of our PDF, and it's very simple, but it can also be extremely complex. So what we can do is we have a quality slider. It only has about, 5 settings here. So you can change it to whatever you need, and that will help to modify the size of your file, number one. Number two, then you can go to edit right here, and you can also create new presets. So I actually have a reduce file size tutorial preset that I made. So I'm going to select that and click on edit. It's going to analyze the file to give us information. And now we have this awesome reduce file size dialog. It is very, very complex, but don't be overwhelmed. It's very easy to use once you understand how it works. You can then basically turn on or off certain assets and even get rid of them altogether when reducing the file size. So you can delete objects by using this. So when it comes to using full color, if I changed it from 72 dpi to, oh, it looks like that's lowest, excuse me. But if I change it basically to something else, then it'll help. Now we can see down here that we have an estimated file size reduction of 9% with the current settings that are turned on right here. So in this file itself, there aren't too many 8-bit color things or monochrome objects. We have 8 full colors and 1 grayscale markup. Then we can also automatically reduce bit depth of compatible images. So there's 5 images that will apply to. Then we can go up here to fonts and we can drop some embedded fonts that may come from CAD or BIM. We can go to miscellaneous here and we can drop certain things. So for example, if there's unused resources that are just some objects that are in the background of a PDF, you can get rid of them if you need to. If there are any external references, that might, delete a lot of things. But if you're confident that extrafs don't need to be there, you can drop them too. So, all right, and that's how you can reduce your file size, both with the reduce file size tab and by using wait for completion instead of iterative draw in preferences. Okay, great. That was an awesome question. So let's go back to questions. Let's see. It looks like we have another question here. When you flatten a document, does it remove security on the PDF? Does it allow you to mark up or overlay stuff? No. Flattening does not affect security, and sometimes you're not allowed to flatten a document if your security permissions are set in a certain way, because flattening is considered changing the document. So if somebody signed a document with security settings, or if they know how to work with the security settings before signing, like I showed you guys earlier, then they might do that. And if that's the case, then you're not even going to be able to flatten. So no, flattening will not basically override it, and your security settings will still stay in place, especially with flattened objects, meaning, I'll show you guys in review something else that's pretty cool, that you can't use the PDF content tools. I've actually trained almost everybody in my office, all my colleagues, and these tools are very, very useful for them. So if you go to the edit dropdown and go to PDF content, we have these tools here, and you can actually get rid of stuff without having to go back into the original program and create a new PDF. So if I needed to quickly delete Open Office 200, I can just get rid of it. It's gone. And because I use the cut tool instead of the delete tool, I can then just do Control V to paste. And now I just turned it into a markup, and I can just put it back whenever I want to. So it's really quite useful. I'm just going to undo a couple times to get that back. And so you're not even going to be able to use PDF content tools if the document is locked. And this is the only way to modify stuff that's flattened. So now you know that if something is flattened, it's not going to change the settings, and you might not even be able to cut or erase things or even edit text, for example. Really, really useful stuff. I'll just give you guys a sneak preview while we're here. If I use edit text, it scans my document for any vector data text. And then I can click on this text here, and I can actually change this to Office 210. And then I press the escape key and it's done. It kept the same font, the same color, everything. It's really, really nice. So I'll just press undo a couple times. There we go. All right, great. Another good question. All right, let's see. Did we have any more questions? I don't see anything in our live chat here. Let me see if we have any questions that were already created earlier. And because we have about 4 minutes left until the end. So let me see if there's anything that we got submitted to us before the presentation started. Oh, here's an interesting one. I got this one a little earlier today. Can I use my tools in other profiles? So the answer for that one is yes, but I don't recommend it. So in our tool chest, I'm going to open up the tool chest right here. If I go to the tool chest dropdown and I go to manage tool sets, I can modify a tool set by clicking on it and clicking on modify. The option show in all profiles is here. If you do this, you're not going to be able to really change your tools. So you won't be able to really add tools to the tool set easily. It will force you to uncheck this, and you're not going to be able to export your tools properly. So I don't recommend using this. I like to have my tools associated with my profile, and that's it. And when I switch profiles, I can have other tools associated with them. If I really needed to, I could copy my tools into a new tool set, or I can temporarily show them in all profiles if I need to for that day. All right, great. So let's get out of that for a second, because I saw another question pop up in our chat. And I see that there's a Q&A tab. Oh, that's cool. I've never seen that before. So an anonymous attendee sent us that. I'll answer the Q&A one in a second, but we do have a question in chat. Let's see, Pablo Pacheco says, how can you separate sheets into different files without invalidating our engineer's sign and seal? Oh, that's a great question. So technically, you can and you can't. So it's not really your fault. It's actually the engineer's fault. Because when you sign and seal something, and by the way, we're going to be going over signing and sealing in its entirety in our third week. So in a couple weeks from today. So what you can do is you need to basically tell them that when they sign, so I'll pretend to sign here, you need to communicate to them to not just use digital signature, because if you try to separate the sheets after they use digital signature, you immediately invalidate everything and they have to sign again. Instead, if they use document certification and they allow for markups, fill-in forms, and digital signatures, that should allow you to use the extract or the export tool in thumbnails. By the way, those tools are found by clicking on the thumbnails dropdown. And we have extract, which is sometimes available. And if it's not, just use export. Archive is PDF-A, just click on that first, and then switch your file type to PDF files instead of the PDF-A, which is an archive tool. So you can do it like that, and then you're going to be making copies of the PDF, and then on those copies, you can put your comments and whatever, but those copies will not be signed. So you should be able to extract if they allow for markups and they use document certification combined with their signature. So that's probably the issue. And Pablo, if you want to reach out to us a little bit later, I can always work with you and your client to make sure that you guys are sending validated files to each other and able to access them properly. We have a couple more questions because I saw that there were a few things there. Oh, yes. Thank you, Carlos, for copying and pasting the Q&A stuff. Very good. So the overlay comparison doesn't work when plans are digitally signed. I have to extract them each time. Is there another way to perform overlay comparison for digitally signed plans? If they're signed, and like I mentioned, if they're using proper security measures, so basically they have lax security, they're allowing for markups, and here I'll show you guys again that list. As long as you allow for markups, filling in forms, and digital signatures when signing, so you can talk to your clients and see if they can change that setting, you should be able to use the overlay comparison tools. If not, then yes, you must extract them each time. So sorry you're going through that, but that's the only way to circumvent that. Signed files can be a bit odd. So, and then I see there's one more question. When you flatten a document, does it remove secure? Oh yes, we already read that one. So perfect. Okay, so you moved that for me already. Okay, I think that's all of our questions. Perfect. Let me go back to our PowerPoint presentation. And I just wanted to thank you all for coming here. I really appreciate it. This is week 1. So next week, we're going to have our second part, which focuses on quantity takeoffs. And the third week focuses on Bluebeam Studio, along with submittals. So signing, sealing, digital IDs. I'm going to cover all the important stuff then. So just so you guys know, we have a blog with tutorials. Oh, sorry. Yes, Carlos.
No, I was going to thank you, Ari, but you're not done yet. Please finish up.
Almost done. I have some logistics. Everything that I covered today, we've created a tutorial on. So you can go to our website. On the upper right, you'll see blog, and then you'll see our Bluebeam one. And we have webinars posted there along with everything that I covered in a specific tutorial. I wrote an article, I made a video about it. So you guys can always check that out. So you don't have to memorize anything I taught you today. And I train people. I train people all the time. I've actually been training all day, every day for about a week and a half this winter. It's been really great. Summer was quiet. So if you guys want some training, let me know. I'd love to train you. We have Bluebeam Review customized training, which you can schedule per hour and any day, anytime you want for you and your colleagues. So just wanted to let you know. Carlos, you wanted to close us out?
Sure. And just to let everyone know, they're automatically registered for the next 2 sessions. So you all need to do nothing. As today, you'll get your invitation from Zoom webinar with your link to log in next Tuesday and the following Tuesday. This was an awesome session. So if you're an attendee, make sure you tell everybody about it. And we'd love to have some more folks with us next Tuesday. And that's it. Thank you, Ari. Thank you, Digital Drafting Systems, for hosting us. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great day,
Carlos.
Everyone. Thank you, Ari.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Take care, guys.